Hey, what it do, what the business is, it's yours truly, LT the Don Juan, last dark of the night, first crack of the sun. Here to bring a little bit of light into the darkness of the world. Today, I wanted to go ahead and jump into a particular topic and or conversation. Kind of combine the story from the Bible, and then we're going to talk about the celestial also, the stars, the moon, the sun, solar system, the galaxy, the universe, what I call God's celestial clock. So we're gonna get into that today, and we're gonna watch a particular video on a guy that I think is pretty affluent in his craft, and we're gonna combine some understanding. I've talked about some aurora borealis in some of my past videos, so I think these aurora borealis in these TV shows that I've talked about recently, heroes speakingly. I think that this particular video might explain some of these phenomena that have been happening in outer space, if you will, or in our solar system, if you will. We're going to get into that. But first, I want to go back to the Truman Show just very briefly. If you remember when Truman was trying to get a bus ticket, it was 12 on the dot, right? So, I think about the two groups in the 10 virgins being called. You know what I'm saying? Now, the reason I say that is because when he actually got on the bus, it was two nuns, right? Sitting on the bus. It was a little girl with a red bow in her hair, and I'm thinking all of these things are symbolic in a way, right? The reason you see the little girl is because she probably represents the wise ones, right? Because she knew who Truman was and was about to give up the juice, right? The two nuns represent the two groups in the 10 virgins, if you will. And then you seen the soldier boy sitting, I believe, behind them. I believe he represents the soldier at Christ's tomb in some way, shape, form, or fashion, right? And these are all allegorical or metaphorical in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Now, when Truman gets on the bus, y'all gotta remember the number 329, right, was the number of the bus, I believe. And they were headed to Chicago also. Chicago being this specific place of transporting or logistically moving, I guess, a mass amount of people into another way of life, if you will. Now, continuing on. So, that's based off the TV show Terra Nova. Anyway, if y'all haven't watched any of my videos concerning that. Anyway, continuing on. So, Truman is on this bus sitting behind these nuns. And we see a black bus driver. Not to be like that, but, anytime they point out these type of details, like the black family that he was waving hi to at the beginning of the movie. Just little bitty details like that. Like how Spider-Man might turn to Miles Morales or whatever his name is, right? Different things like that. When the character swap like that, the human flame or the human torch becomes Michael B. Jordan and things like that. When characters swap, that's trying to let you know something. When Falcon becomes Captain America, so on and so forth. Even if you go watch Ted 2, but we're not gonna get into that. That's going too far. Anyway, all of these character swaps is trying to give you some information, just like Superman 3 with Richard Pryor, and they both had to help each other, right? So continuing on, that's the red and blue coming together. That's the enmity between the serpent seed and the woman seed, somehow doing what they supposed to do, versus being that enmity forever, because that was only meant to be for a period of time. Anyway, continuing on. So 329 in the Truman Show expressed a story about a bramble, right? A bramble bush. But within this story, they talked about trees, and the trees represented the people, and the people wanted a specific tree to rule over them, right? So they asked the vine, will you rule over us? They asked the oak tree, they asked all these different trees to rule over them. So, they finally got to the bramble, and I guess the bramble was like, hey, Yeah, I'll rule over y'all, and everything will be good and peaceable, and everything will be right and holy. And then the Bramble soul ended up ruling, but the Bramble brought upon them chaos and destruction and desolation. Now, naturally, you would think this story is talking about King Abimelech, because that's who it's concerning. His brother's name is Jotham. Um, he had 70 brothers, 71 brothers, right? He killed 70 of them, and then one got away, Jotham. And then including himself would make 72. Now, these 72 brothers represent the nations of the world, right? This is from the Tower of Babel, or this is from Noah's time and his descendants after him, right? Which will become many nations, if you will. These nations are represented in many different ways, right? Even if you go through Abraham and till on. During the time of Moses had 70 that he had to share his spirit with, including his brother Aaron. Even in the time of Christ gave 70 his spirit so that they could go out and perform his works, right? You'll see this pattern a lot. Even when they come to being in bondage, 70 years will pop up more than once a lot, if you will. Whether it came to bondage, or when it came to a time or a period that would pass when judgment would come, or a time or a period when freedom would come, or a time or a period when releasing would come. This number 70 is prevalent, but it represents the nations in this particular story, right? And we're going to break it down as such through the brothers. Okay. So King Abimelech is expressed as the Bramble. Now, because he had great ambitions to be king, he went on ahead and took out his 70 brothers. He sought to take out Jotham, but Jotham escaped, right? So he managed to knock off 70, and one managed to escape. Okay, so continuing on. Now, if we use these as allegories like I did in the number 23 and the Truman Show, we're going to obviously see King Abimelech and Jotham as figures of Christ, right? We have to understand that these are metaphors of Jesus Christ, Yahashua, right? Yeshua, if you will, right? So when we think of this, we have to metaphorically put that in perspective. All right, so continuing on. All right, so it came down to a point where King Abimelech is bringing all this chaos and destruction, and he ended up chasing the whole kingdom into a tower, right? Now we know this tower is symbolic, if you will, right? We talked about this tower before. This tower represents something very specific. A lot of times this tower represents a temple. A lot of times the temple represents some way, shape, form, of fashion, the divine mother, right? And you can tell because even in the Bible they'll say she is the church, the church, the church. Well, that's the same as saying the temple. Now continuing on. So in this instance of this story, King Abimelech is chasing people into the temple, if you will. Now, once everybody goes inside, a woman at the top of the tower drops a rock down on King Abimelech's head. And the rock, it disarms him and practically kills him. But it doesn't immediately kill him, so he's alive long enough to tell one of his soldiers to run him through, because he didn't want the story to be about a woman taking him off the map with some boulder, right? Okay, so what does this mean in the esoterica, right? All right, well, we know that the woman at the top of the tower, right, she represents the temple itself. Now, the temple and her being at the height of the temple is symbolic of her being in the heights of heaven, if you will, right? Now, the boulder or the stone that she drops down is the stone that the builders rejected, if you will, right? This is the cornerstone. So we know that this rock, if you will, is Jesus Christ. In many stories, you'll hear of Jesus Christ being a rock, right? We'll throw up some scriptures to go ahead and, revelate that to you. But in many scriptures, and people that even been going to church all their life, whether they know what that means or not, know Jesus Christ is symbolically a rock. Okay, so boom. She drops the rock down from heaven, right? This rock is not just any physical rock necessarily. This rock is symbolic of Christ coming down from the heights. Remember, she is wisdom in a sense, right? So wisdom made this decision, right? she portrayed God in some type of way in the heavens, right? And superposition, I always keep saying in my past stories, if y'all know about quantum physics or whatever have you. And she portrayed the 0 and 1 simultaneousness in order to give birth to this rock, if you will. So she cast the rock, it seemed like herself in this particular story, right? She cast the rock from the heights down into the king. This transference is symbolic of the spirit coming down into man. Now, we know that Christ, the rock, had to come down into man to be destroyed, right? He had to come down to be destroyed, right? And he also had to come down to bring judgment into this world. So the story of him coming and bringing judgment is actually a afterthought of what he's coming to do after the rock was dropped down on his head. See, we think of this story that, okay, when the king got the rock dropped down on his head and he told the soldier to run him through, that was the end of the story. But if you perceive this story as, oh, okay, now since he's been ran through and sacrificed himself in a sense, right? The rock or the spirit come down on his head, the crown, if you will, right? And then him being ran through by his own people, Judas, right? Israel, if you will, right? His own people, because you got to remember Pontius Pilate and all of them at some period in point of this whole judgment against him didn't want nothing to do with it, right? The wife was even influencing, you know what I'm saying? So continuing on. Now, that story is of Christ. So how did Christ continue on? He continued on through Jotham, right? So now we got to get the names of Abimelech. How can we confer that Abimelech is Christ? Through his name, right? Because Abimelech is the king that is going to be sacrificed. Jotham is the one that survived. The other 70 were sacrificed because of the simple fact they all represented one, right? So he had to come sacrifice himself for all the nations. Continuing on. All right. So let's see. Abimelech. So Abimelech itself means my father is king, or father of a king, right? So we know that God in heaven and Christ on earth are symbolic of this message right here. So this right here is telling you that King Abimelech is father's son, right? And that his father is the king, if you will, right? Father of a king. My father is king, right? My father is a king, father of a king, right? That's crazy. Because remember, Ab means father. Melech means king. So father, king. My father is king. That's tough. So that's like me saying, my father is king. You see what I'm saying? So that's like Christ saying, my father is king, right? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he came down because of his father who is king, right? Gave his only begotten son to be ran through, in a sense, for the sins of all the nations of the world. All 70 plus nations of the world, 72 nations of the world, symbolized in the Bible, right? Continuing on. Christ the rock, if you will, right? So what is Jotham, right? And what was the outcome of Jotham, since he survived, right? It says, Yahweh is perfect. God is perfect, right? Yah is complete, right? God is complete. Okay, so God is perfect. God is complete. All right, well, continuing on from there. So we got King Jotham, if you will, right? Now, what did King Jotham survive to do?
King Jotham of Judah built the temple's upper gate and expanded fortified cities after surviving his father's leprosy. He also defeated the Ammonites, becoming a righteous and powerful ruler during his 16-year reign.
He ruled for 16 years. He built the upper gates of the temple. That is pretty unique if you think about that metaphorically or spiritually speaking, right? Because we talking about the gates or access to something, right? Access to the temple. Now, I believe access to the temple gives you access in other ways, because we got to think that's where at some period in time in history they interfaced with God, if you will, right? Continuing on.
Once upon a time in the prosperous kingdom of Judah, a new ruler ascended to the throne. His name was Jotham, the son of Uzziah, who had shown great promise before him. At just 25 years, he embraced the weighty responsibility of leadership and ruled for 16 years over Jerusalem. In his heart, Jotham knew the path laid out before him. He aimed to mirror the righteous deeds of his father. Yet despite his good intentions, the people around him continued in their ways, straying from the sacred observances of their faith. They corrupted themselves, worshiping idols and forgetting the Lord who had brought them thus far. Standing firm in his principles, Jotham did not yield to the tides of corruption. Instead, he fortified his kingdom. He set about strengthening the sacred spaces, building the high gate of the house of the Lord, and expanding the walls of Ophel. His vision stretched across the land. He raised cities nestled in the mountains and constructed castles and towers amid the dense forests. His diligent work did not go unnoticed. The Ammonites, recognizing his strength and leadership, brought him gifts each year: silvery talents, abundant crops of wheat, and barley that filled his granaries. It was clear that the Lord's favor rested on him, for Jotham diligently prepared his ways before God. Jotham's might did not manifest through grand conquests or bombastic speeches. Rather, he embodied a different strength, one found in obedience to God's will. He knew that true power lay in humility and in the reverent service of his Creator. In the annals of history, his name may not resonate with the thunder of battle, but rather it shines with the luminescence of wisdom and honor. Jotham ruled justly, forging a path of integrity and righteousness. When the time came, King Jotham laid down to sleep with his ancestors, and his remains were honored in the city of David. The story of Jotham reminds us that even the quietest builders can leave a monumental legacy, inspiring all to pursue a life of faith and service. Thus concludes the tale of the king who built with purpose, ruled with justice, and walked humbly with his God.
The 16th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the Ayin, which looks like this in the modern Hebrew alphabet. But in the ancient Hebrew, this letter was the picture of an eye. The Hebrew word ayin, the name of this letter, means eye, as found in Exodus 21:24, eye for an eye. On a side note, the Hebrew word translated as for in this verse is tachat and means under, but is often used in the context of in place of. So Exodus 21:24 should read eye in place of an eye. The letter ayin has the meanings of watch, know in the sense of seeing and experiencing, and shade from the act of shading your eyes in the sun. This letter is silent and is used as a glottal stop, like in the word Baal. Some words that begin with this letter are Eved, a servant; Avar, a verb meaning to cross over, and is the root of the word Hebrew; Ed, witness; Of, bird; Am, people; Oef, neck, and may be the origin of the word giraffe. Notice the similarity between the word ayin and the English word eye. Is this the origin of our word eye? The pictograph of the letter ayin can be seen in this inscription, which includes the word Baalt, meaning lady, and is the feminine form of the noun Baal, meaning Lord. The early Hebrew ayin evolved into the simpler form of the Middle Hebrew around 1000 BC and can be seen in this inscription on a potsherd, which has the Hebrew word Shema, meaning hear. The Middle Hebrew letter became the Greek letter Omicron, which then became the letter O in the Roman alphabet. Around the 4th century BC, the Middle Hebrew letter then evolved into the Late Hebrew, which can be seen in this Dead Sea Scroll. The Late Hebrew then evolved into the modern Hebrew letter that is still used today and can be seen in the Aleppo Codex.
And I just want to bring this up because when the alleged replica of the Ark of the Covenant was supposedly here at Mar-a-Lago in America, and I guess they was taking it on this little tour or something like that. It's just very interesting if we look at the time span that any of these biblical artifacts or these replicas was here, because I swear it was from 2019 to about 2024 or something like that, 2025. So when you look at that time span of that time period, anywhere between there's just some unique anomalies that were going on in Florida. And now, if we think about the Ark of the Covenant being a part of this whole scenario, which make a lot of sense about all the weird things if you start looking up Florida that was going on now. But one thing I wanted to speak on, speakingly about this ark, that just was real interesting, if it was ever even there for real, allegedly, right, is that if you pay attention to the ocean or the sea life around Florida, now this is probably a natural phenomenon, but the sea life in Florida particularly, not too far, probably from Mar-a-Lago considerably, the fish and the sea animals was stuck in doing some spinning out of cycle motion type of situation. It was like some type of anomaly or phenomenon. Maybe even it was seasonal or something like that. Maybe this happens often and all the time. However, if you look this up, they ended up doing a whole 25-30 minute documentation of these sea creatures spinning out of their loop. You see what I'm saying? Now, I thought that maybe it's just an interesting story about fish spinning. But then when I put the Ark of the Covenant into the whole scenario, look up the stories of what the Ark of the Covenant did. It made animals do weird things, frogs and rats and all of that. And then it also brought plague. So 2019 to 2020, what happened? You know what I'm saying? And then you start putting 2 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 with the UAPs and all these other things going on in Florida. And then the fish spinning out of their loop. I'm just thinking. And then I'm having ESP extrasensory perception of all of these things that I told these stories before they happened at the beginning of the year back in 2024. Yeah, 2024. Yeah, I was going to say the end of 2023, early 2024. But I had a dream and told my dream, shared that dream with everybody. Probably when came back after I confirmed that dream came to reality in some type of way, I probably did a video following it up.
An endangered species could be facing a new threat.
It's unusual.
A population that was slowly recovering in the Florida Keys is now being found dead on our shores or displaying unusual behavior, spinning in circles.
In my lifetime of dives, I've never seen any behavior like this from fish at all.
And it usually is associated with some kind of a agent that is having a neurological impact.
Dr. Michael P. Crosby with Moat Marine Laboratory and Aquarium, part of the effort to find a solution to why these sawfish and other marine life are being affected in this way. Since January 30th, FWC has received 365 calls to their fish kill hotline and 28 sawfish reported dead, and the reason as to why is still being investigated. An endangered species could be facing.
Imagine swimming in the crystal clear waters of the Florida Keys. You spot fish spinning in circles, unable to stop until they die. Sounds like a horror story, right? This bizarre sighting shook researchers between November 2023 and April 2024. The culprit? Toxic algae. These algae infiltrated the organs of marine species, causing neurological chaos. But here's the twist. It's happening again. And this time the algae levels are lower. So what's going on? Marine biologists are now racing against time to uncover the mystery. Is it another toxin, a virus, or something we haven't even considered yet? Each day, more fish are spotted with this eerie spinning behavior. Researchers are collecting samples, analyzing water quality, and scrutinizing every possible clue. The stakes are high. Our marine ecosystems depend on it. So why are fish spinning to death again in Florida? The answer could unlock new realms of scientific discovery. Stay tuned as marine biologists dive deeper into this underwater enigma. Hit that follow button to keep up with the latest findings, because this mystery is far from solved.
"2023, that's a year we probably won't forget for a long time. Seeing those temperature records being broken daily was pretty hard.
In late 2023 and then into the winter of 2024, fishermen started reporting that they were seeing spinning fish, abnormal behavior. They were extremely disoriented.
They're spiraling or they're swimming in circles. Sometimes they'll splash or they'll do somersaults.
Some fishers will bob their head out of the water and kind of gasp.
It started off small, but then it increased to dozens of reports every day.
But these reports just kept coming in.
By December, it increased. By January, it doubled again. By February, it doubled again. And it peaked in March.
And the peak of it, a lot of places became lifeless. There's no fish. As the waters warmed, the reports got less and less, and then as we got into summer, it just vanished.
While fish are known to spin when they're stressed, and there had been other reports of spinning fish in the past, the Florida Keys had never experienced a spinning event of this magnitude.
Ground zero was around Cudjoe Key, Big Pine Key, and Sugarloaf. That's where it started, and from there it emanated east and west, reaching as far north as Lower Key Largo, and as far west as about Key West. It was on both sides of the Keys, oceanside and bayside.
There were over 80 species of fish.
70 of those were bony fish, and 10 were the sharks and rays.
The vast majority of fish species seemed to eventually recover. But it was devastating for one iconic South Florida animal, the endangered small-toothed sawfish.
These large sawfish basically swimming in circles with their rostrum up out of the water. Some of them were beaching themselves and dying. And it started as a trickle, and then it quickly ramped up.
By early summer of 2024, 56 small-toothed sawfish had been reported dead, with many more potentially unaccounted for.
And that's alarming because they're critically endangered and their reproduction is slow as well.
What's really causing it all? That's the question. I don't think anybody has the complete answer yet.
Early on, a team of multidisciplinary scientists.
What if I told you that the legendary Ark of the Covenant found its way to Trump's Mar-a-Lago? Stay tuned, because this story will blow your mind. For 3 years, a team worked tirelessly to create a replica of this sacred artifact, believed to hold immense power. When the Torah was placed inside, the chief architect cryptically stated it became weaponized. But what does that mean? Before its journey to Israel, this replica sat in Mar-a-Lago, the very heart of Trump's world. Why? Some say it symbolizes a prophecy about the Third Temple, while others believe it ties into the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. As tensions rise, the Ark's presence is said to inspire both hope and fear, a beacon for some and a weapon for others. Who truly holds the power in this ancient tale? Like and subscribe for more shocking revelations about history's most mysterious artifacts. What if I...
Here's a wild Bible fact. In 1 Samuel 5-6, when the Philistines stole the Ark of the Covenant, God struck them with a plague of emerods. Most scholars think this means painful tumors or swellings, possibly from rats and disease. It was so bad, they begged to return the Ark to Israel, along with a guilt offering of golden rats and emerods. The Bible pulls no punches. Follow for more. Here's a
because this stuff gets that real. But anyway, continuing on, y'all. It's just amazing. So King Jotham reigned for 16 years after that, and then he went on to build the temple's upper gates, right? He expanded fortified cities, and he defeated the Ammonites, right? So those are all great feats when we talk about a king of Judah, because that's what he was. So we got to see Christ in all of those type of things. Now, we can go to the number 16 when it talks about the Hebrew alphabet, right? That's how you incorporate the fact that he reigned for 16 years. So what does that 16 years entail to us, right? It means, first, it's the Zayin, if you will. Typically written and pronounced as Teth Zayin, right? 9 and a 7, okay? And it says a new beginning. It says love or spiritual completeness, right? 8 plus 8. It is often used for the 16th day of the month. In Strong's Concordance, it refers to Iba, or Ibe, meaning desire or swift, as the reads. Ooh, that's hard. It interprets as new beginnings outside of time. Ooh, don't let me get to going too hard. Hold on. It often associated with the completeness of 7. And biblical numerology represents the love or the perfected love of God, right? That's tough. It says to avoid using the first 2 letters of God's holy name in everyday context. It is generally written a certain way. eBay, papyrus, reeds, or longing. Because we know God loves his children, no matter how ignorant we are and don't know, you know. And if you know, you know. So I ain't talking to you. Continuing. And if you don't know, I ain't judging. Continuing on. So it says the 16th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, meaning eye. Ooh. Meaning perception. Ooh. It also means spring with a numerical value of 70. See, we know Christ is symbolic of a wellspring also, because he's the one coming up out of the abyss. He the one bringing life, eternal life springing up eternally. You see what I'm saying? Life everlasting. He represents a spring well. He represents a river flowing of eternal waters. Just like Adam was placed in the middle of the garden on the river between both the trees. You're going to always see that happen even with Moses, praised up the Nile River, right? Because I drew you out of water. You always going to see these associations with water because we are water bearers. Simple as that. Now, I ain't trying to brag. That's just like descendancy. Like, Father is very specific if he want to be. And we can be unaware of those type of things. Everybody from throughout Adam all the way through Noah, all the way up through Moses, all the way up to whoever. Why is it impossible that they possibly could have been born at the same time? All the way up to Christ. because they using that formula in the Bible more than people are aware of. You know what I'm saying? Then that formula exists in this world and life in ways that people ain't paying attention to. You got 2 hands, 10 fingers, right? 2 toes, 2 feet, 10 toes. You see what I'm saying? So that 210 applies in basic ways, if you look at it. But that's just going the extra mile. Continuing on. But you know, your 23 base pairs, yeah, every time it spirals, it's 210. Check that out. It's just very particular when we're talking about all the way down to the genetic structure. Even when we're talking about the calendars and every 19 years and 210-day cycles, you got to think about leaping forward and daylight savings time and all these things. And why do they even do that, right? What are they manipulating? What type of formulating are they using? And how can you understand what that means when it concerns Christ, point blank, period, right? Because 210, maybe it's a number 23 effect, and once you see the 23, you're going to see it everywhere, but this is different, man. Because before I even start looking at 210, it was given to me from the source first. And once the source gave me that knowingness, then 210 made sense to me, right? Because I wouldn't have knew how to apply it otherwise. I'd have just seen 210 like I always have my whole life. Oh, that's my birthday, can keep it pushing, moving on. All right, well, how does 210 apply to the calendar? The 23 base pairs in your cellular structure, and that is 210 in a spiral every time your DNA has the spiral. That's 210 every time. Every spiral is 210, 210 every time. So when you think of what that means, that is very, very deep. You know what I'm saying? So that's geometry in a sense, right? When it comes to your DNA. But all of these things are applicable in some way. So when you start applying it in ways that you really can't understand right now, but I tell those things in my story, man, they apply to everything that's ever been anything in the public eye, right? And if you have a keen eye or perception of that, as it just said, right, you can see what's really going on. That's why the story of Abimelech is really about Christ. You got to understand the multifacets of who Christ is. You got to start understanding each character's meaning, right? And how they apply to all of that. But continuing on, right? So, the upper gates, boy. Woo, otherworldly things. I like outside of time. You know what I'm saying? Now, if you want to know what that really means, that's talking about the day of rest. That's talking about the last day that Christ was talking about with Mary and Martha. And that's also talking about the 8th day in the sense of the last day, right? The 8th day, where time is over with, where all things are complete, where you get to come into your rest. But trust and believe me, when you come into your rest finally, you gonna actually come into your life. And when you come into your life, the last thing you probably gonna feel like you need is that. Continuing on. Remember, these white garments is gonna continue to pop up. Now, that's another thing that I wanted to mention, because Abimelech's daddy actually was Gideon. So if we look at Gideon like he's the king, because Gideon was one of the judges in the Bible, right? King Gideon, or if you will, the judge Gideon went hard. I keep calling him king, but Gideon was judge. He didn't want to be the king, actually. He actually denied his throne. But that makes humble sense if you know how this really goes for real. But anyway, continuing on. So Gideon, if we refer back to Gideon is the one that had to go into fight with only 300 men. Now, we've been talking about this dog star Sirius because of the Truman Show and the number 23 and stuff like that I've talked about. So through those metaphors and sublime messagings or whatever have you in these movies, I've been talking about Sirius a lot recently. So we're going to actually watch something, because I think that's going to bring in the aspect of these Aurora Borealis, God's celestial clock, and a couple of other things of that notion. But continuing on. So what is it about Gideon besides the 300? Well, we know that he started off with about 10,000 soldiers, right? And God told him, or the angel told him, that that's too many men. Even though they finna go fight a great army. You see what I'm saying? He said, I need you to narrow it down to about 300. Gideon like 300? Foo-hoo, what I'm gonna do with 300? They got like 10,000 soldiers over here. And you want me to narrow my 10,000 down that really can't even compete to they 10th of thousands? Okay, so he said, well, send the ones down to the river. Here go the water again, right? Here goes the water is like the spirit, if you will, right? He said the ones that go down and drink from the river and lap the water up like a dog, from the water or the spirit, right? He said those 300 are the ones that's going to go with you into battle. Boom. So they did that. Now the next thing in this story is interesting because now that he got his 300, Gideon asked for 3 signs. Now, for 11 years now, when I do what I do, usually I try to ignore signs because people try to make me think this, and that. And I ain't talking about everyday people, but we're not going to talk about the people that I think made me think anything. But continuing on, try to make me deny God anyway. That's a shame. But continuing on. Anyway, so I would ignore the first sign too. The second sign, I'd be iffy about it. The third sign, I would totally pay attention to it, like the Trinity, right? Like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, if you will. Why you think they say the Father, the Son anyway? Why is it not the Father, the Holy Spirit, then the Son? What are y'all hiding? Obviously. Continuing on. The only reason the Holy Spirit changed from her to a him is simply because Christ came down and sacrificed his life. But that's in some of my other stories. So you're going to have to find out how he became wisdom and wisdom not being wisdom herself anymore. Anyway, continuing on. Gideon needed 3 sons, if you will. And so I lived my life like that for 11 years. Like, I will probably have a thought in my head and I'm thinking to God. I might even be talking out loud to God sometimes. So what? And, you know, it'll just be between me and God. And then next thing I know, there's just some other corresponding outside matter that will come into view. Whether it was somebody else that said something that I thought to God or talked to God out loud about. Or it will be something that just so happened to be I'll walk in somewhere and it was a song playing in the grocery store. Or maybe, you know, all these different manifestations. But it would be through something on TV, it would be through something in music, and it would be through a person of some shape, form, or fashion that I probably had no connections to and or ties with. And if I seen those 3 signs, to me, that would let me know that this is God communicating to me in my perspective. But continuing on. So, what is Gideon all about? Because I think Gideon's name is a forbearance of what was going to happen to King Abimelech, right? Because Abimelech was expressed as being a tree. We know that Christ is symbolic of being the root and the vine, which means Christ is the root of any tree, right? We know he the root of Jesse even, right? And we know that the root of Jesse is represented as a tree stump, right? We know that when these lineages who controlled the garments of Noah, through Nimrod and so on and so forth until it came back into the hands of Jacob and his family. One of those people, I believe, at some point that had this capacity was Nebuchadnezzar. Now, don't quote me on that. But what I do believe is that Nebuchadnezzar did have some garments of a kind, like the kind that Esau and Adam and all of these other people had bared at some point in history all the way down to Christ. I believe Nebuchadnezzar had these garments at some point also, because I'm telling you one thing about the garments is that they're going to endow you with some knowingness that's beyond your pay grade, so to speak, right? As soon as you put them garments on, you're going to know stuff like you did it yourself. You see what I'm saying? And Nebuchadnezzar had that at one point. Nimrod had that experience at one point. That's why he tried to build the Tower of Babel. Nebuchadnezzar had it at one point. That's why he was having dreams of big-ass trees and all this other shit. Because I've seen that tree myself before, but I'm not finna get into that story, you know? Because, see, I seen that tree before I went and read about it or watched any of these videos. You got to think back to 2015. People probably was just now starting to get fed all the conspiracy theories and all this other stuff. I was already knowing quite a bit without learning none of that stuff. So one of the things I knew was about this great tree, so to speak, right? And I knew that the great tree had been chopped down. One of them, anyway. At least one of them. But continuing on. I didn't know that that story was in the Bible. I had to read the Bible after what happened to me 11 years ago to understand what happened to me in the first place. But anyway, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream about a great tree anyway. Woo-hoo. Man. Going through for real. But thank God that I had the spirit in the mind to know that Earth is school when I got here. Anyway, continuing on. Nebuchadnezzar had these experiences for a reason. Just like Nimrod did. Anyway, continuing on. So, we know that in the story of Nebuchadnezzar, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego had on these garments and they walked into a pit of fire, came out unscathed, and Christ showed up in the pit of fire with them. It was 3 of them, then it was 4. But continuing on. So, back to Gideon. Gideon needed 3 signs, right? And the 3 signs Gideon asked for, I feel, are parabolic to what was going to happen to Abimelech. But Gideon's name itself means the hewer, the feller, or one who cuts down, often interpreted as a great warrior or a mighty warrior, right? So we know to cut down what? To cut down the tree, right? Because there's plenty of stories in the Bible where one branch is going to be brought up and one branch is going to be brought down. One branch is going to be planted by the river and all the water and the bonds are going to be drawn to it. These are all different stories in the Bible. And y'all got to go read the story about the trees. You can just type it in, Google it or something. Story about the tree being brought up and one being brought down. Story about the branches. And I'm telling you, you'll find quite a bit of interest in it if you can see through the allegories and the metaphors. But continuing on. So Gideon means the hewer, the one who cuts down. Often interpreted as a great warrior and a mighty warrior, right? And so we know the great tree, or one of the great trees, was chopped down, right? And if you go into any of these stories about Nimrod and them, you'll start hearing some interesting things about trees getting chopped down. And then if you look back at what supposedly, allegedly, the Archangel Michael did, and then that's allegedly something to do with the Sahara Desert existing. But you know, those are stories y'all can go look into for yourself. But continuing on, right? So Gideon needed 3 signs from God. And just like I used that same method, even though nowadays I trust everything the first time, I don't need 3 signs no more. Because I be trusting that the 3 signs are going to show up anyway. I'm kind of used to it now. So, what were the signs that Gideon asked for, right? What were the 3 signs Gideon asked for?
Gideon requested 3 signs from God. First, fire consumed his offering. Second, a fleece remained
Okay,
wet
so
while the ground was
boom.
dry. Finally,
First,
the fleece stayed dry when the ground was wet.
This is crazy, y'all, because I think this incorporates Christ as the rock again. This also incorporates, to me, Christ is not a dead being. You know, that even though he got powers like a ghost, because he's wearing his righteousness, he's wearing his garments that was passed down to his lineage, so to speak. And see, Christ is God, so he understood what he was doing all the way from the beginning. Y'all got to know that even if you don't. But one of the things is that even the law itself, see, I knew this before I read it in the Bible. Like, I'm telling y'all, man, I got slapped with understanding one day, if that's what you want to call it. It was deeper than that, but I'm going to say that just to keep everybody on the same page. But that understanding hit me one day, and that understanding understood to me that because the world was going to go crazy and everybody was just going to be carnal, like in the days of Noah and stuff like that, that Christ had to be born into at least a reasonable species, so to speak, of human beings. And that was going to take a period of time in history. That's why the flood happened in the first place, because they had to wipe everybody out and keep the genetic pool that was left over that they could use, which was Noah and his family, allegedly. And whatever story and whatever culture that you already know is different names. Anyway, continuing on. So that family survived so that one day Christ could be born through one of those families, right? What you got, Ham, Japheth, and them, right? But continuing on. So once the reseeding of the earth happened and stuff like that, and then the time of Moses came into being, and Abraham and all of them, that's why Abraham was brought out of Mesopotamia, right? That's why he was brought out of that place in that land, so that God could separate his gene pool from them, right? And that through Abraham's gene pool, eventually they was going to keep it clean enough. I ain't saying they was perfect or something like that, but they was going to keep the gene pool clean enough that until Christ was born. That's why Mary and Joseph was picked, and everything else under the sun, whatever was going on all the way up until that point, was so that when Christ was born through the law that they was abiding through, that a seed would be able to come through that, right? And once the seed was born through that, them abiding through those laws, he was the fulfillment of the law, literally. That was the reason for it, is so that he could be born into this world out of a genetic family that was at least not so tainted by all that was going on that I'm sure y'all done read something about by now, But continuing on. So Gideon asked for 3 signs from God, right? That's the Trinity sign, Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. If I see it and hear it and communicate it, and it manifests in more than 1 or 2 ways, that's the signs, right? So the first one was a fire from a rock consumed a sacrifice of meat and bread. We know the meat and bread is symbolizing Christ, right? We know that the rock is symbolizing Christ, but the rock consumed it with fire, right? Because when we think about when Christ showed himself in the upper room, this is after he had been sacrificed, if you will, on the cross. This is after he went to hell, if you will, right? Now, hell, a lot of times, is represented by consuming fire, right? God is even represented a lot as a consuming fire, whether you know that or not, right? So Christ went as the rock into that consuming fire, right? To bring out his people, right? And so these are allegories and metaphors, as the fire being a consuming rock, eating up the meat and bread, right? If you will, right? Ooh, that's cold. A consuming rock, right? A fiery rock. So that rock that came on Abimelech's head is like a fiery rock. That fire is symbolic of the Holy Spirit, if you will, right? Continuing on. The other 2 signs was that he wanted a wool fleece to be placed on the ground that was wet with dew, while the rest of the ground was dry as all get out. Like, ain't no way that's possible, right? Because they expressing to you garmentry here. Remember the golden fleece, right? Remember Christ is the shepherd. Put on Christ, if you will, right? They rigging to you, or they speaking to you in codes what you supposed to be doing in some way, shape, form, or fashion. So since he saw that sign, that wasn't enough for him. He wanted another sign. He was like, all right, reverse it. Flip it and reverse it. He was like, the next time I need you to reverse this and make the fleece dry while the rest of the ground is soaking wet. So this happened. Now, yes, this is possible in any way. You could go wait till they sleep and go dump the fleece in the bucket and so on and so forth, and have him convinced. But to me, I believe allegorically and metaphorically speaking, that this is speaking about being clothed in a certain way, right? Just like the 2 groups in the 10 virgins. One was going to have all of the dew, and one of them wasn't going to have no dew, but the dew was going to be surrounding them, and they wasn't going to have none of it. Continuing on. Right? So these was the 3 signs of Gideon, and he's the hewer on a chopper, remember? And one of the dreams of King Nebuchadnezzar, since he was wielding some power that probably didn't belong to his genetic gene pool necessarily, but since they probably was like part of the family on the other side or something like that, maybe they could wield this power. But I'm telling you, that it's gonna have some side effects, I'm sure. Think about half of your presidents, man. half of your presidents, for some reason, always had these degenerative cellular neurological fucking problems. Excuse my language. But to me personally, when we talking about Abraham Lincoln and JFK, I think they were involved with things we can't comprehend right now, and I'm gonna leave it at that. And that's just that on that. But you start going to look up Adolf Hitler, and you start wondering, why did they have these kind of problems? I'm gonna just say they was probably playing with stuff that they didn't fully understand yet. But continuing on. So Gideon needed 3 sons. He was the hewner or the chopper down. Now in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of a statue, because he wanted everybody to bow down to this great statue. And this great statue had a golden head of himself, a silver chest, it had a bronze body and iron legs, and clay mingled with iron feet, right? And the clay and the iron would not mix together, because this is the enmity in several different ways, more than you can imagine. But I keep it earthly, at least. I keep it politically speaking, or governmentally speaking, if you will, when we talking about this body. Because we know that these precious metals represented different ages, if you will, right? These different ages were symbolic of King Nebuchadnezzar's statue. Gold, silver, bronze, iron mingled with clay, right? Now we know that the iron and the clay would not get along and would not mix together. It's a reason that they would not mix together, because the iron was rebelling against what the clay is even here for on this earth to begin with, right? But trust and believe me, God has got a plan in all of that. So we just gonna continue moving on through this story. Now in his dream, there was a rock not hewn by human hands, right? This rock was hewn by God's hands from a mountain, if I'm not mistaken. And that rock flew down from the mountain and crushed the feet and the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, right? Representing all these combined nations over time in history, right? Babylon, Persia, Media, right? And all these different places like that, right? All the way up into this kingdom, if you could believe it, right? Or I mean up into this era, if you will, right? So how can we look at these different ages of life? Because I've expressed this in the past in some of my videos back in Greek times, right? There was a golden age in Greece, a silver age in Greece, a bronze age, an iron age, right? And different ages of a nature. Now, you can go watch some of my past videos concerning that. But in this particular video, we want to look at the celestial concerning this, because we've seen dogs pop up so much here between the number 23, the Truman Show, where the Sirius lamp fell out the sky and he realized he was living in a false world. We've seen Sirius Leary on the number 23, right? And these names are specifically Sirius, like the dog star. We've seen dogs and dog walking things pop up. I showed you that the dog walking is symbolic of Hermanubis, the Greek and Egyptian god combined, right? The messenger god, the carrier of people into the next realm, if you will, right? We showed you these many different circumstances of a dog in some type of way. So how does this apply here when we're talking about these different ages or eras, if you will, right? We looked at King Abimelech. We seen the Christ aspect of him through the Truman Show, the number 329 being the bramble tree or the bramble bush. King Abimelech being the bramble, or actually being Christ himself. Now, yes, he came to judge in a sense, but he also came to bear the burden of the judgments also, right? So that's why the people were safe in the tower and the rock landed on him, instead of them being what was done in other stories in the Bible, where the story didn't quite go the same way for the people in the tower, right? He came to be the sacrifice of all of those things. But continuing on. So if we think about this Sirius star, there are stories that I guess we share an orbital path with the dog star Sirius, right? And that this orbital path of the dog star is so wide and long that it takes quite a bit of time for us to go back around into the central orbit before we orbit around the star where we come closest so we can get to each other before we go back out into our own orbital paths. They call the shape of that the vesica Pisces of this orbital path. So when they get close, they coming around the central point, right? They meet here on either side, and then they go back out into their orbital paths. So we gonna watch a video on that because somehow I think the aurora borealis that have happened, all these events that seem to have been in movies and seem like they had some forbearance of these things back in the 80s, and probably we can go back way before that things would happen to people that would cause them to be affected by these natural phenomena, right? And they put them in TV shows all the way up until today called Heroes and stuff like that, to where I even have any reality of those things happen in real life, right? That's crazy, because we've all been experiencing these TV shows in real life in some type of way lately, whether we know that or not. So let's watch this video. This is my main man named Santos Bonacci, right? Santos Bonacci is finna talk about maybe something that it could express what might be happening to people on God's celestial clock, right? His universal clock, right? The sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, right? The satellites, the moons, right? All of these different bodies in the galaxy and the universe itself. All of this dark matter, antimatter, all of this space and cosmic energy that we floating through and around all the time, right? How does that affect the human being down here on Earth? I showed y'all the Sefer Yetzirah and the Jewish and Hebrew studies, right? The Sefer Yetzirah explains to you through the Hebrew alphabet the beginning of time and space and the universe and everything in it in some weird manner. I don't know how they had time to come up with this. I had my own experiences to even know that before I read even what that was. I didn't know that existed until my knowing existed enough to know that these things can be found somewhere in some culture. But y'all gonna be able to put all of this together pretty soon, because I'm giving it to you straight as I can. Yeah, I might blabber and blabberskite a lot, but I'm still giving you things that you can't buy, obviously. So I'm just gonna do what God told me to do, whether anybody support it or not. Y'all don't understand what's really taking place right now anyway. So I'm gonna do what has to be done and hope that planting these seeds in some way, shape, form, or fashion will bring some substance to it when God is ready. You understand? But continuing on, we're going to watch Santos Bonacci, man. And then after we watch Santos Bonacci, I want y'all to tell me what y'all think. Continuing on.
1,000-year processional cycle is back to the Dvapara Yuga. Certain Hindu scholars say that we've already entered the Dvapara Yuga in the 1700s, so about 200 or 300 years ago. Whereas others tend to say that the Dvapara Yuga has not begun yet. We're still at the end of the Kali Yuga. Nonetheless, in all the traditions, we are at that time when a great transition takes place. A wonderful transition. And all the religious traditions are looking forward to this time because they know that it will bring much peace and love and joy and wisdom to mankind. If we have a good look at our solar system and how it works, for instance, the moon goes around the Earth. The Earth, in turn, is rotating and orbiting the Sun. So it takes 365 days to go around the Sun. Now, our Sun, in turn, is orbiting Sirius. Sirius being the brightest star in the sky and in the sector of Cancer, right near Gemini, is in a binary with our star. And every 24,000 years, we go around each other in a clockwise motion. Sirius and our Sun have been going away from each other for the last couple of thousand years, and now they've turned the corner, so they're heading towards one another. As we reach the outer limits of that orbit, that elliptical orbit with our Sun and Sirius, this is where the Iron Age is. The Golden Age is when they are close to each other, and then as they separate, they go through the Silver and the Bronze to the Iron Age. Well, that affects the consciousness of mankind, because we have 100% consciousness when the two stars are close to each other. The consciousness falls to 75%, 50%, and 25%. We've not enjoyed full consciousness for a long time, and many of the gifts and abilities and powers that we once had. As we have turned the corner in the great orbit of our two suns, Sirius and our sun, as we have turned the corner and they are hurtling towards each other now, we have turned the corner from the dark ages. We've come out of the dark period because the suns have been pulled apart and their influence is weakened, and therefore our consciousness has dropped, and we're in the dark ages. Now they're pulling towards each other, bringing us to a higher consciousness, and that's nature. Nature brings us, ascends, helps us, and carries us through the ascension process. So it's all loving, even though there's chaos and there's fear and anguish and chaotic events occurring around us in our world. Even though that is happening, that's really just the remnants of the dark ages. So we've turned the corner. The two suns are hurtling towards each other at great speeds now, and that's the beautiful part of where we are. We've turned the corner. So we're really in just a great time in history to be living. It's just an amazing time. The great changes that we will see with our own eyes will just be stupendous. In the book of Daniel of the Bible, it says that in this time many will come to an accurate knowledge of the truth, and they will whiten their robes, and they will turn to the truth. But it also mentions that many will just go off into the darkness and continue on the path of darkness. The more one loves and finds unity in this world and harmony, the more the blessings will be when that time comes. All shall benefit on different levels. Even the unawakened will benefit, because that's how the universe elevates souls. Our sun, as we have turned the corner and they are hurtling towards each other now, we have turned the corner from the dark ages. We've come out of the dark period because the suns have been pulled apart and their influence is weakened, and therefore our consciousness has dropped, and we're in the dark ages. Now they're pulling towards each other, bringing us to a higher consciousness, and that's nature. Nature brings us, ascends, helps us, and carries us through the ascension process. So it's all loving. We can expect to enjoy a much more harmonious world and high consciousness, because where the sun is taking us in the 24,000 year processional cycle is back to the Dvapara Yuga. Certain Hindu scholars say that we've already entered the Dvapara Yuga in the 1700s, so about 200 or 300 years ago. Whereas others tend to say that the Dvapara Yuga has not begun yet. We're still at the end of the Kali Yuga. Nonetheless, in all the traditions, we are at that time when a great transition takes place. A wonderful transition. And all the religious traditions are looking forward to this time, because they know that it will bring much peace and love and joy and wisdom to mankind.
Okay, we back at it again, y'all. I hope y'all understood what Santos was actually talking about. So, I'm not saying we're a binary system or that we are orbiting around Sirius, but I'm saying if we observe this theory or this observation, we can see that if that was true, universally speaking, celestially speaking, that could be an expression of why human beings right now could be going through different experiences of knowledge and wisdom that they have not learned in books or online. Some of this understanding is inherently in our genetic structure, in our blood, if you will, containing memory, in the water containing memory, in our literal DNA containing memory, in our 23 base pairs. So the things that we are coming into knowledge, knowing, and or understanding of, I really believe it is from God. And I really do believe that if you have a pineal gland that is not destroyed and completely calcified, that your tuning factors within your existence in your body will bring about to you the things that the universe has to offer directly from He who is all, through all, for all, and in all. And if we can't understand what that even means at all, then we need to reevaluate who we think God is or isn't, right? But continuing on from there, I hope that y'all learned something today, man. Are y'all trying to earn your right to passage, right? Are you trying to earn your garments of righteousness? Do you know what those really are? Do you know how those things apply to you in any way, shape, form, or fashion? Have you read any of these stories whatsoever? Do you see how this continues to show up in many different aspects and or ways? Santos Bonacci went to quoting Daniel himself, right? Because anybody who has been touched by God and his wisdom is going to kind of understand something. This is the school of life. Earth is school. So every day is a lesson. Every day is a blessing. Every day I can learn something from somebody I don't know. Every day I can learn something from myself. Every day I can learn something from my kids. I can learn something from anybody that is in my life that will cross paths in my life in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And if I see God in those things, or God teaches me and or shows me something about just the human experience, period, I'm going to take it into account for better or for worse. Because that's what this is all about here. We already married to life. Yeah, whether you think you asked to be here or not, trust and believe me, you made it here. And now you have the opportunity to complete what has been started. You know, this is the time for greater works than these Christ spoke about. And if y'all don't understand what he was saying, I mean, man, it's been 2,000 years. Look around you and look within you and look about you and see what is available and what can you take your money and purify it. What can you take your money and purify it and get purified gold from the fire? What can you make white garments with out of those proceeds? How can God use you to be prepared for the day of the Lord so that your nakedness will not be shown in that day? How you gonna get clothed for the day of the Lord? What you gonna be wearing? Cause it ain't finna be no Brooks Brothers Brooks. You see what I'm saying? It ain't finna be none of that. So whatever you think you finna be wearing in the day of the Lord, you better start reading, watching, doing something besides what the money got you caught and wrapped up in, which thank the Lord that you have any resources in life. You see what I'm saying? But them resources need to be applied with some knowing. And if you're not gonna know nothing today and you just gonna keep being blindly obedient and you don't know if God right here before us or not, you might have spit or slapped in his face and don't even know it. So having said that, we should start acting accordingly like if God was one of us in a generation where we got all of this stuff around us, boy. You wonder why we facing a climax of a certain kind. Any major war that has ever happened in our knowing of time and space, right? First World War, Second World War, the Third World War among us, right? All of these sub-type wars of whatever kind you want to label them, they were always over the next latest and greatest, right? The next latest and greatest what's going to be the future of tomorrow. Whether that was communications or whatever have you. These things are fought over. What is in this generation in the 21st century that exists right now, that in some way, shape, form, or fashion, we discussed these topics in a way, especially in my most recent videos, what exists right now that they could be fighting over whatsoever? It's something to think about because this stuff is real. And there's people walking around on this earth that y'all just don't know. Y'all don't even know y'allself, let alone the people that's walking around here that do know who they are. Y'all need to get to know you, because the more you get to know yourself, the more you going to act accordingly in this world to your peers, to your loved ones, and whoever it may be. Sabotage and trying to set people up and trying to backstab people and do all these earthly, carnal-ass things that come through hate, jealousy, envy, right? Greed, gluttonousness, and all of those things like that, right? The 7 deadly sins. Yeah. You don't need to be believing in something and living like that. And you ain't nobody that I know gonna be able to ever put dirt on my name and schmut on my name and say that's how I lived. And if they telling you that, you ain't heard me talking about nobody bad. And if I do, it's the truth. And I promise you, I'd rather not. Because, see, I learned one thing about life. People like to gossip and people like to talk. And conversation runs the nation, so to speak. So what goes around come around in that aspect too. And whatever the world has to offer, I'm not interested in what the world got to offer. God showing me things that you can't understand. Maybe. If you know, you know. If you don't, then you on the path of discovery, I hope. Because there's things going on you need to start comprehending in real time. And in real life. You know what I'm saying? If you really care about the things in your life outside of monetary gains, the flesh and blood that you probably created or brought into this world or share a world with, then you might need to start thinking about what you gonna do with them monetary gains to get them purified gold, because your money ain't clean in some type of way. Especially if you're using God and you don't know what to do. Clean that money, purify it in the fire, right? Purify your gold in the fire. Get your white garments, because if you naked on the day of the Lord, man, I'm telling you, it's going to be interesting, whatever happens in that way. Whatever house you built, if it ain't left standing, whatever house is left standing, we going to show and approve its work. You feel me? If your house ain't left standing, we know which one of the pigs you was. House out of straw, house out of wood. You know, wood ain't too bad, but, you know, y'all using outdated materials and whatnot. You see what I'm saying? Even the brick house in this generation is outdated. So whatever them pigs was on, they need to go ahead and level up in 2026. However they building their house in 2026 need to be way different than when we was kids growing up and learning the houses they was building to run away from the big bad wolf. Matter of fact, it's 2026. You shouldn't have to run from the big bad wolf anymore. Simple as pie. You know? You really shouldn't even be having to run from the wolf no more. But anyway, I hope that through the King Abimelech that you've seen the stories of Christ, because this is why he said you search the scriptures in a certain manner. And you don't see what you need to see when you search in the scriptures. You don't see Christ in the Old Testament and or the New Testament. And if you do, you do. Right? Any of these things can be sought and understood and or known. But are you really seeking with your heart, or are you just serving God with your mouth? That's what we need to know in this generation, because the cup runneth over right now. Y'all don't understand that? Because the psychological warfare is very comfortable, I guess, here in America. But trust and believe me, when they slap you up out of this psychological warfare that you in, it's going to be for the better and not for the worse. But it might seem like it get worse before it get better. So y'all need to be aware of the game plan of what God is intending for all of these things, right? Jeremiah 29:11 forever. I'm always go back to it just because he's speaking into the future when he's saying that too. He not just talking to Jeremiah and his generation, or Isaiah and his generation. He talking to this generation as well. So y'all need to understand those things in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Hey, but you know, it's all love. It's yours truly, LT the Don Juan. Hey, go do your own work and do your homework. Hopefully you learn something from me. Hopefully I'm pouring into you, because that's all I'm doing is being obedient, at least in a way that is active. You know, like, I love God. You know what I'm saying? I love the Lord. I love God's people. The ignorant ones, the ones that are alive and well and know themselves. I love everybody that exists, because I've been to things and places that I have to have consideration for life now. You know? I came from things that, you know, man, you have a serious value for the existence of life when you know things about the beginning of time and space and stuff like that, or even think you know anything about those things. If God slap you with it, trust me, the experience and the effect of it is going to last on you forever. It don't matter who you go out here and have relationships with and lay with and stay with. The truth of the matter is you're going to be eternally affected by knowing what God even put us in this world for at all. Remember, that spirit inside you is a down payment for what you need to be putting on. Get your money cleaned up, purified in fire, gold. Take that gold, buy you some white garments. It's my story for today. It's yours truly, LT the Don Juan. Love, peace, and hair grease. Y'all already know what it is. I'll holler at y'all next time. Peace.
What happens when a righteous judge's son becomes a murderer? After Gideon's death, Abimelech would massacre 70 of his brothers to seize power. With Gideon gone, Israel forgot God again. Abimelech saw his chance. He went to his mother's family in Shechem with a simple question. Would you rather be ruled by 70 sons of Gideon or just one? And they chose one. Big mistake. They go and give Abimelech 70 pieces of silver from the treasury of their idol. Abimelech took the silver they gave him and hired assassins and mercenaries. And he did the unthinkable. He goes to his father's house, and as he's welcomed in, he calls in his brutes to grab all of his 70 brothers and bring them to the stone in Ophrah. And there he murders them all there, all 69 brothers, on a single stone, one by one. Only Jotham, the youngest, managed to escape by hiding. Jotham climbs up Mount Gerizim, and he shouts a prophetic parable to Shechem. The parable was, the trees wanted a king. The olive tree, the fig tree, and the vine all refused. They had better things to do. Only the worthless Bramble accepted, saying, if you truly want me as king, come take shelter in my shade. If not, let fire come out and devour the cedars of Lebanon. This was not just a parable. He pronounces a curse on Abimelech and anyone who is with him. And then young Jotham goes and hides himself again. God then sends an evil spirit between Abimelech and Shechem. Civil war erupted. Abimelech burned 1,000 people alive in a tower. But at Thebez, a citadel, a woman dropped a millstone on his head, crushing his skull. As he lay dying, he begged his armor bearer to kill him, so no one could say of him that Abimelech was killed by a woman. The Bramble king was dead. Divine justice served. God brought the curse of Jotham to fruition, repaying evil to Abimelech for the evil that he did to his fathers and brothers. God repays measure for measure, good for good, evil for evil.
Daniel hears but does not fully understand. My Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? He is told, go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, made spotless, and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand. From the time the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the one who waits and reaches the 1,335 days. Finally, Daniel is told, as for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. The book closes. Daniel, the prophet of visions, assured of resurrection and reward, even as mysteries remain sealed for the end of time. Follow for more Bible stories.
Daniel 12:2-3 says, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. This is a powerful prophecy, a glimpse of the final resurrection. Every soul will rise, some to eternal glory, others to everlasting shame. Now is the time to choose whom you will serve. Don't sleep in spiritual darkness, for the hour is coming when the trumpet shall sound, and every secret will be revealed. Be among the wise who shine like stars, those who live in righteousness and lead others to truth. For when that day comes, only those who stand with Christ will awaken to everlasting life.
The most mysterious day of the Bible, the 8th day. In the book of mysteries, the teacher leads the disciple into the chamber of scrolls. And there he removes a scroll, rolls it out on the table, opens up to the passage he's looking for. It's a Torah scroll. And he reads from the ancient words. It says this, "You will celebrate the feast of the Lord for 7 days, with a complete rest on the first day and a complete rest on the 8th day." The scripture is speaking of the Feast of Tabernacles. But there's something strange about that scripture. I don't know if you noticed it. It says the feast will be for 7 days. You'll celebrate for 7 days with a rest on the 8th day. How do you get an 8th day from a 7-day feast? 7 is the number of the days of the Feast of Tabernacles and also the days of creation. Every week has 7 days. So then what is the 8th day? You might think, well, there's no 8th day because there's only 7 days, yet there is. Just like the contradiction right here. If the 7th day speaks of the end, then of what does the 8th day speak? The 8th day speaks about the day after the end. The number 8 speaks of that which comes after the end. If 7's the end, 8 is what comes after. But you might think nothing can come after the end or it wouldn't be the end. Well, that's the point. It contradicts everything. 7 is the number of the days of the creation, of this finite creation. But 8 is the number that transcends, breaks out of the creation, breaks out of time, breaks out of numbers, breaks out of this life. So what exactly happened on this mysterious day called the 8th day of the feast that only has 7 days? It's a mystery. In Hebrew, the day is called Shemini Atzeret. It literally means the gathering of the 8th day. The Feast of Tabernacles is the last of the holy days, the appointed times of God, the final feast. So it speaks of what happens at the end, but the 8th day speaks about what happens at the end, after the end of days. Notice how the Bible ends. You got the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is about the closing of everything. And what do you see, what number do you see throughout the book of Revelation? The number 7 all the time. 7 trumpets, 7 angels, 7 bowls, 7. It's the ending, it's closing. But then you get to the very end of Revelation and all of a sudden there's no more 7s. Why? Because you've entered the 8th day. What is the 8th day? It's the day of eternity. It's the day of heaven. It's the day that's beyond all days. It's the very last of God's holy appointed times. It's the mystery day. And we who belong to God, you who belong to God, you're of the 8th day. When the creation ends, that's when we're going to enter it. We're going to enter the day beyond days. When the finite yields to the infinite, that's heaven. We're of heaven, so we're of the 8th day. The age beyond ages, eternity. But you know, there's another secret here. See, those who live in God now, who live in the Spirit, can actually partake of the 8th day even now, in the Spirit. How can you do that before the end, before heaven? Well, you go beyond the end, even now. Beyond the end of yourself. You get beyond the end of the finite. You break out of what's limited. You live beyond the end of yourself. You start living beyond the end of your abilities. God gives you that power by the Spirit, by the resurrection. You've got the power to live beyond your circumstances, beyond this world. You're in it, but not of it. Beyond the finite, behind all your limitations, beyond it all. You can do it. You can't do it in the natural, but in the power of God, you can do it. Because you already, if you're born again, guess what? You're living your whole life after the end of your whole life. You're living in a supernatural period. So live all out.
In Psalm 119, verses 113 through 120, King David gives us the beautiful odiote meaning of the Hebrew letter Samek. The letter Samek is a picture of a shield. It means to pierce, sharp, support, prop, hate, hand on a staff, infinity, thorn, protect, grab, uphold, lean upon, shelter, division, and enclosed like a wall. Psalm 119, verse 113. The double-minded I hate, but your Torah I love. The words double-minded comes from one Hebrew word that starts with the letter Samek, and the word is Hebrew Strong's 5588 Sif, which means divided, which shows the odiote of the letter Samek, which means divided. Also, the word hate shows the letter Samek, that can also mean hate. Psalm 119, verse 114. You are my hiding place and my shield. I have waited for your word. The word hiding place starts with the letter Samek, and the word is Hebrew Strong's 5643 Sether, and has the meaning of a covering or a hiding place, showing the odiote of Samek, which can mean a shelter, for Yahuwah is our shelter. And the word shield in this passage also shows the odiote of Samek, which has the meaning of a shield, for Yahuwah is our shelter and our shield. Psalm 119, verse 115. Depart from me.
Learn the Hebrew alphabet by Minister Gale. Lesson 16, Samech. Stone, rock, support, spine. Isaiah 28:16. S or soft C, the number 60. The rock, a stone, a sure foundation. The priestly blessing uses 60 bones in the hands and the arms. Samech, letter S, soft C. Deuteronomy 32:3 and 4. He is the rock, capital R-O-C-K. 1 Corinthians 10:4, and that rock was Christ the Messiah. Learn Hebrew letters, Samech, rock in Hebrew, sure foundation. 2000 BC, 1000 BC, 400 BC, and today it is the symbol of a rock.